These are the top 5 worst players in Game of Thrones. Starting off with number 5, Robb Stark. I thought Robb Stark was a decent player in the Game of Thrones early in the series, making good decisions like summoning his bannermen when Ned Stark was imprisoned in King's Landing, and capturing Jaime Lannister, which was a masterstroke. I still don't know how he managed to do this, but it was brilliant. However, things go downhill from there. Some of the mistakes he made were marrying Talisa Maega, who was Jane Westerling in the books. This was a massive mistake because at the time, Robb Stark was in the middle of a war, so this was the worst time to do it. But also, normally when you marry someone from Westeros, you get something out of it like gold, men, armies, castles, or even titles. But when Robb Stark married Talisa, he got none of these, and nothing that could help him win the war. He should have married somebody else. The next mistake he made was letting Theon Greyjoy go to Pike to recruit more men for his army. This was another big mistake because when you think about it, Balon Greyjoy hated the Starks, so even if Theon went to him to ask for armies, he was never going to allow that to happen, and if anything, he was actually going to launch attacks against Robb Stark because, he held a grudge basically, so that was a bad mistake. Another one was betraying Walder Frey. So Robb Stark was promised to marry one of Walder Frey's daughters, and he broke his vow. And I think, yeah, obviously with the Red Wedding, Walder Frey didn't take that too well. And the last mistake was executing Rickard Karstark, which was a huge mistake because the Karstarks made up a large part of Robb's army. So when he cut off Rickard Karstark's head, he lost like a big chunk of his army. So he never should have done that. Obviously, there were events that led to that, but I think it's something that could have been avoided. And I think in general, I don't think Robb Stark is like the worst player ever, but because he made such big mistakes, he deserves to be on this list. Number 4, Joffrey Baratheon. I think the best decision Joffrey made was becoming king, but that wasn't really his decision. He just became king because he was next in line, so that doesn't really count. Some of the mistakes he made were having Ned Stark executed. This was such a stupid mistake because what should have happened is Joffrey should have kept Ned Stark as a prisoner and traded him to get Jaime Lannister back. That's what should have happened, but I guess Joffrey does whatever he wants. The next big mistake he made was, this is something that he did throughout the entire series, is being cruel to Sansa, Tyrion, and other citizens of King's Landing. I'm not really sure why he does this because every time he's cruel to someone, he literally creates a new enemy, and he builds up this reputation of being a cruel king, and it's no surprise that he ends up being poisoned. All he has to do as king is he's already Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. So all he has to do is just not screw it up. So just being a good king, making good decisions, and making allies. But he does none of those things. Number 3, Theon Greyjoy. I think the best decision Theon made was going back to the Iron Islands. He does this inadvertently because he was only going back to recruit men for Robb's army, but he ends up taking his place as prince. Some of the mistakes he makes are burning 2 random farm boys and passing them off as Bronn and Rickon Stark, which was a massive mistake because he literally gets the entire North to hate him and call for his head. What he should have done instead is follow his father's orders and learn how to become a good leader, instead of going to Winterfell, a place that he can't even hold, and get captured by Ramsay Bolton. A ridiculous decision. Number 2, Viserys Targaryen. He could be number 1 on this list. I think the best decision Viserys makes is marrying Daenerys to Khal Drogo. Some of the mistakes he makes are, here I've got being cruel to Daenerys, but I think a bigger mistake is having no self-awareness. For some reason, Viserys is extremely arrogant. He has no gold, he has no army, and he hasn't really accomplished anything. So for him to have this level of arrogance in the series is absolutely ridiculous, and it gets him into a lot of trouble, which leads to the next mistake: drawing a sword in a Dothraki camp. The reason why he does this is because he's mad that Khal Drogo hasn't given him an army, and he threatens Daenerys. But this is the worst thing you could do in a Dothraki camp, Dothraki, because if you bring out a weapon in a Dothraki camp is a sacred place. If you do this, it means death, so you're gonna be executed. So obviously, a massive mistake. Number 1, Brienne of Tarth. I'm not sure why Brienne is such a popular character. Actually, I do. She accomplishes so much in the show that you have to like her, but in the books, she's the worst. I think some of the good decisions Brienne makes is becoming part of Renly's Kingsguard and also escaping Renly's camp with Catelyn Stark. Some of the mistakes she makes is agreeing to escort Jaime Lannister to King's Landing. This is a massive mistake because at this point in the show or in the books, we know how dangerous Westeros is. Now, I know they avoid the King's Road, so that is the most dangerous route they could have gone, but either way, there's only two things that could possibly happen from this situation. Number 1, they get captured, or number 2, they both get killed. Either way, it doesn't end well. The next big mistake she makes is not bargaining with Roose Bolton. So you have Roose Bolton, Brienne of Tarth, and Jaime Lannister all sitting around a table. I think they're having dinner. So Jaime Lannister and Roose Bolton start talking to each other. They're basically playing the game. Jaime says that what's going to happen when my father sees I've lost a hand. Roose Bolton says that's a problem. And then he basically says, don't tell him it was me. And Jaime says something, and they continue talking until it ends. Brienne comes in and says, I'll be escorting Jaime to King's Landing. Roose Bolton says that's not happening. So the thing with this is that hopefully my explanation was kind of okay. Jaime was basically bargaining with Roose Bolton. They were both basically playing the game. But because Brienne doesn't really understand what's going on, she doesn't understand that she should have been bargaining for her life as well. But she doesn't do that. And that's the reason why she's number 1 on this list. She doesn't understand when the game needs to be played. And that's about it.